Hey, solopreneurs, Gabe here. Today we have BT Harman of btharman.com. It is a fantastic conversation on gratitude, self mapping, and how to spin multiple plates and keep from going nuts while doing it. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I know you will too. BT, thanks for being on the podcast.
Man, it's good to be here. It's a great day.
Good, good. I'm really excited to have you on. I mean, you're going to talk about some things that a lot of solopreneurs come across, and that's like trying to spin multiple plates and gratitude and self-mapping and how to handle all those interests at the same time. And I'm really excited to hear that information from you. But I have to go to, you just got done with a pilgrimage. You got something going on that not everybody is doing. So can you share that with us? What'd you just get back from doing?
Yeah, so in a couple weeks, actually, I'll turn 40. So 40th birthday, big deal. And so I thought for months about what do I want to do to celebrate my birthday. We're gonna go to, rent a house in the Caribbean, we do something fun, something special, invite friends. And the more I thought about it, I said, I want to do something significant, not just lay on the beach and drink daiquiris. So I had two friends, Bill and Kitty Murray, and a couple years back, they had done something called the Camino de Santiago. And I watched them on Instagram, and it just looked fascinating. But so what it is, it's basically a 500-mile historically Christian pilgrimage across northern Spain. And so how this whole thing got started is kind of wild. But in 800, around 8 or 900 AD, this monk claims to have found the bones of the Apostle James in Santiago, which is on the western coast of Spain. And so the church comes in, they kind of verify it, they build a cathedral. And so for the next 1,000 years, Christian pilgrims from all over Europe begin making this trek to this cathedral in Santiago. And as I think it eventually became the third most popular pilgrimage in Christendom after Jerusalem and Rome. And so you basically start in southern France. There's multiple routes that you can take, but the route that I took was called the Camino Frances, which is the French way. So you start in southern France and you walk for 500 miles to get to this cathedral in Santiago. And so instead of walking it, I kind of did a little bit of a hybrid model. I walked about 200 miles and then I biked about 300 of the miles to sort of speed it up. Typically, it'll take you about a month to do it if you walk, but I wanted to compress it down to about 3 weeks. So yeah, I am fresh off. I just got back a couple days ago, still a little bit jet lagged, but just had an incredible experience.
Wow. That is so what were maybe some takeaways? I mean, because you're going to talk about gratitude, you're going to talk about self-mapping, you're going to talk about spinning plates. And frankly, you were probably having a whole heck of a lot of conversations with yourself along those 500 miles. I mean, so what were your big takeaways from that?
Okay, that's actually a great way to describe the Camino. It's 500 miles of talking to yourself. That's really it. So it was amazing. I'm by nature just a contemplative, sort of self-reflective person. We'll talk later about this idea of self-mapping, of just really zoning in on radical self-awareness and knowing yourself so well, and then sort of retooling the skills and gifts that you have to make an impact in the world. So yeah, that was a big part of it. I'm 39, turning 40. I just feel like I have so many wonderful years left of career and life and family. And so I really use this time to think about those things, to evaluate where I've been, where I'm going. And when you're walking 8 hours a day, because yeah, typically you're averaging about 13 to 18 miles per day on foot, which translates to about 7 to 8, not maybe 9 hours. So when you've got all that time to yourself, you're in nature, you have these incredible sort of sweeping vistas of the Pyrenees mountains, and then the next day you're walking through what looks like an enchanted forest, and the next day you're in kind of a desert climate, and it's like you're in, uh, you know, uh, Sedona or something, and then the whole thing has a very kind of biblical topography at times, so it feels like you're sort of tracing the steps of the saints of old. So yeah, just being submerged in that level of natural beauty, somewhat disconnected. I'm a screen guy. I like my phone. I like my social media. So I didn't totally disconnect, but just by the nature of where you are and the encounters that you're having, extremely transformative, and I would even say life changing.
So how often were you by yourself? Or were there other people walking along at the same time? I mean, how often were you just totally by yourself?
I would say the majority of the time I was solo. So yeah, it's again, there's a lot of people that do this pilgrimage. It's 2021 is the numbers have been down a bit due to COVID, but Yeah, I mean, you definitely see other pilgrims on the way. The symbol of the Camino is a actual scallop shell, and this is what pilgrims have carried for 1,000 years. So you look in the distance, and you'll see somebody with a backpack with a scallop shell dangling off of it, and that kind of lets you know that, hey, we're kind of on the same team. We're moving in the same direction. We're out searching for something, and that's kind of how I viewed this pilgrimage. Was everybody you meet is searching for something, or they're dealing with either a life crisis, a life transition, or maybe some great joy or celebration. So yeah, you're by yourself a lot. I mean, there are some times where I would look around, and as far as the eye could see, there was not another soul. So, did some screaming, some therapeutic shouting, some praying, some quiet meditating, some listening to music and podcasts. Like I said, when none of us are used to 8 hours of uninterrupted time a day. I mean, that's to the modern mind that is completely unheard of at best and anathema at worst. But as it turns out, it's just very healing and very special. So very very grateful for it.
Really interesting. Um, I'm sure someone else is thinking this, and it's on top of my mind. Is a was it safe? Did it feel safe?
Yeah.
And B, where'd you sleep? I know it's a dumb question, but where'd you sleep?
So one, it does feel safe, and that's a lot of people ask that. I was documenting a lot of this on Instagram, and it felt very safe, strangely, because that was one of my big concerns. I mean, you're in a foreign country, walking alone. You could be robbed, but it doesn't happen. The thing I remind people is the towns along the way are very used to pilgrims. They're very welcoming to pilgrims. They have a great economic incentive to keep the pilgrims happy. So there aren't just bandits running wild on the trail because that would be devastating to the experience of the Camino. So it does. It feels very safe the whole time. A lot of people equate the Camino to like the Appalachian Trail, where we're sleeping in tents and we're cooking our own food and we're using the bathroom in a latrine. It's not like that. You're moving through civilization for the most part. There are some wilderness aspects, but if you get in trouble, you call 112, which is the Spanish version of 911. So or you can call a taxi if you get in trouble. So that's why I'm such a big proponent of this. Is everybody in all fitness levels, all ages. I mean, the number of 70 and 80-year-old pilgrims that I met was incredibly inspiring. Walking 15 miles a day with a 30-pound pack on their back. So yeah, it felt very safe. Your second question, where do you sleep? The Camino is a very hostel based sort of journey. So it's not nobody stays in tents. You don't sleep in hammocks really. It's mostly hostels. I chose not to do hostels. I did very small, kind of basic private rooms. I just made that decision primarily to avoid COVID interactions with lots of folks sleeping in the same room together. But you can do it. You can stay in nice hotels if you want. You can stay in very simple, cheap rooms, or you can do the hostel thing, which are literally $5 to $10 per night. So the whole experience can be made extremely economical, which is pretty neat. And wine, a glass of wine in Spain on the Camino is about $2, about €2. So that was nice too.
That is nice. That's great. So I have to ask, and we're going to transition into what you're going to talk about and share with us, but so help us understand what you do. I mean, not everybody can go and take 3 weeks off to do a pilgrimage. I mean, sometimes, like with COVID, people have had to take time off because they were sick or had to take time off to help take care of kids or family members or whatever. And that's happening for years, but not everybody can take 3 weeks off or more to go do a pilgrimage. So help us understand what you do in this world.
Yeah, I'll turn back the clock a little bit. Graduating college in 2005, had an English degree from a very small state school in North Alabama. And at that time, didn't know what I wanted to do, but jumped on board with a startup. I was the third employee of a small startup called Booster, and it was a couple of guys who had this idea for a revolutionary version of elementary school fundraising. So, for the last 30 or 40 years, most kids raising funds for schools sell magazines, they sell knickknacks, they sell chocolate. Well, they had this idea of doing a healthy and fitness based fun run. So, having teams of people come in, host the fun run, the kids get pledges, we organize everything, give out prizes, and then at the end of the time, the company would keep a percentage of what was raised. And so, when I started, it was just a fledgling, brand new idea. Wasn't even sure if it would work, but that company just exploded in growth. And so I jumped on board. Was in Birmingham, Alabama for a couple of years. Moved up to Nashville. I was running our program, so working with kids and schools and teachers and parents every single day, just running myself ragged. But absolutely loved it. The organization itself just could not be better. I mean, even to this day, it's run by phenomenal people. They value culture. They value empowering their team members, and that was really where I got my business chops. Growing up, my dad was a pastor. My mom was a teacher, so I did not have any background in business or money or leadership, and so. um, it was that experience that just completely submerged me in that. So 2007, 8, the economy crashes. I'm in Nashville. I was not good at my, I was in a sales role there. I'm not a salesperson, did not know that at the time. And so they basically said, hey, the bad news is we're shutting down your market in Nashville. The good news is we want you to move to Atlanta and be our head of marketing. So I did that for the next 7 or 8 years. Eventually grew a creative and marketing team of about 20 people that we had in house. And we're creating content for kids, everything from coloring books to music albums to very elaborate videos. We did a lot of character content sort of in tandem with the fundraiser. So we wanted to add value in that way. Eventually was on our executive team. And so in 2016, I stepped away. I just sort of resigned and it, cried my eyes out talking to my boss in his office late one night because I said, Chris, you've done everything right. You've been the perfect boss. You pay me fantastic money. My job is fulfilling, but I have this sense that I need to go out on my own. And it's something I'd always wanted to do. And so, yeah, walked away from it in 2016 and embarked on my new life as a solopreneur. So began doing that. So now I do all manner of things. I have maybe half a dozen different revenue streams. Some of them are more like trickles even than streams. But I do consulting with small businesses around all things storytelling. So marketing, creative, graphic design, copywriting. I'm a practitioner in those things, and then also do advising around it, brand strategy. And then I have two podcasts that I've launched that have both been fairly successful that are very different, but they have been exciting as well. And then I have a group called Harbor, or a small business called Harbor, I guess you call it, which is a support group for the Christian parents of LGBTQ kids. So, and then I have a true crime podcast, and then another podcast that's my coming out story and growing up as a closeted gay person whose dad was a Southern Baptist pastor. So I'm all over the map, Gabe. I mean, I've been people have been telling me my entire life, you need to focus, you need to, and I'm like, I enjoy the randomness, I enjoy the variety of this life, and I'm so happy and so fulfilled. And disengaging from that corporate structure in 2016 was the best decision I ever made.
That's awesome. So that basically that disengagement, as you said, that changeover was the all right. I'm going to go just try all kinds of stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, you had a passion for the marketing and the piece, and so you were probably able to make that transition. But what was the hardest part about making that transition from the corporate world to your solopreneur world?
It was really the loss of of having a team. I am a person who I love leadership. I love management. I love leading and managing people. Like I said, I had a team of 20, and getting into the nitty gritty of investing in my team members, helping them grow, helping them have breakthroughs and achieve their goals and dreams, I absolutely loved. And even more than that, our executive team. We had an executive team at Booster of maybe 7 or 8 people that were just Gabe, it was a dream. I mean, to be on a team of all of no duds, all stars, right? They're kind, they're intelligent, they're thoughtful, they're humble, they're challenging, they're business minded. To sit in that room, we had an executive team meeting every week, and to sit in that room with that group and to deal with incredibly challenging business problems and issues and personnel things, but also to laugh and make jokes. That is something I have not remotely replicated in my solopreneur life. So I still love what I do, and the upside of having independence and time freedom still outweighs that. But I definitely miss just having a team to check in with that was so good. That was just so good. So
No wonder you cried your eyes out when you were sitting in your boss's office. Holy buckets, dude!
that's it.
Most solopreneur stories are not that way.
Yeah.
Most solopreneur stories are, all right, I'm sick of this. I'm making this change. I want to do it my way. I'm making this change. I'm downsized. I'd rather just go do this myself. I'm making this change. There's always that piece for a solopreneur that has that, inner struggle that says, all right, I need to go do my own thing. But rarely is it when everything is awesome. So
Yeah.
that's kudos to you, man, for having for lack of that put it, having the balls to make that change.
Well, thanks. I mean, and it was such a yeah, it was such a so many conflicting feelings. I mean, I always take it back to people. Why did you leave? For me, it was the three-headed beast of emails, meetings, and commuting.
Mhm.
Those were the three things that were, because when you begin with a startup, those three things are mostly contained, at least the first two. But as the organization grows, potentially the higher that you go to the executive level, when you're getting 100, 200 emails per day, when you're 8 hours of a day, it comes down to 4 to 6 hours sitting in meetings. And I'm naturally a creative person. I am designed on this earth, put on this earth to create things. And so it just got to a point where the email management, the meetings, and then I was commuting about 2 hours a day. It kind of got into that soul crushing zone. And so that's what I told my boss. I said, Chris, these are things you really can't change. Like if any company I go to, there's going to be an element of too many emails, too many meetings, and possibly commuting. And so that was the tension. Was like, gosh, I love these people, I love this organization, I love the mission, and I make good money. But the potential to have command and freedom of my time, that was the key piece that I wanted, and that's what I now have.
Love it. Absolutely love it. So help me understand then, how do you manage the time with multiple things going on? Are you a big time blocker? Are you just kind of flying by the seat of your pants? I mean, how are you handling all of these multiple things that you have going on?
Yeah, I got to be honest, Gabe. I've not been great at this historically. I am not by nature a very organized and systematized person. I resist routine so much. That is just who I am. However, I have the self awareness to know that that's not good. There has to be an element of discipline, structure to the day, and that kind of thing. One of the things, a couple things that I've added into my daily rituals. Because here's the thing: the day I quit my job, I gained 2 hours of my life back per day. Like 2 hours, like that is an enormous chunk of time that you can reinvest into so many things, which was one reason why I needed to leave. And so yeah, for the first time in my life, I have a consistent workout routine. I do CrossFit 4 mornings a week at 7 a.m. And that has been great because the danger, the toxicity of the solopreneur life is that your time just gets frittered away. And social media is always in your ear, barking for your attention because it's always easier to scroll than it is to create or to build or to lead. And so what I've learned is that yeah, getting up in the morning, working out. Again, this is basic stuff that we have been preached to about since we first got into business. But as it turns out, it actually works. And so getting that adrenaline going, working out, getting my body moving, coming back. I cook breakfast every day. I get a shower and then I get dressed. I put on shoes. It took me about 4 years to realize the key to work from home productivity for me is putting on an outfit, putting on a shirt, shorts, jeans, and shoes. The shoes are the key part for me. And so I now have sort of gotten into that routine where my productivity is stronger than it's ever been, and it's made a big difference.
That's great. So you found a way to have your routine in place, even though you were fighting it.
That's it. Yeah, and that's the benefit of being in a corporate structure is the routine is pre-built, right? It's a pre-made routine. You have to be in the office at 8 a.m. and the day gets going. And so that's been one a big struggle for me has been replicating that myself because no one's holding me accountable but me. But I'm oddly motivated by that. One thing I love about being a freelancer, a solopreneur is it's feast or famine and it's all on me. I'm not dependent upon any other structure or getting a raise from someone that's out of my control, and I thrive under that pressure. I love it.
Oh, that's great. So why don't we make a transition into what you're going to share with us today, your insights, your experience on gratitude, self-mapping, and what I would call spinning multiple plates, because you're currently doing that. Help us understand.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there's a couple things that are I speak rarely, occasionally about leadership because, like I said, it's a passion of mine. I was reading, John Maxwell books when I was 16 years old, and then led teams in a corporate space for many years. And so I over those years, sort of developed just a couple of key beliefs about leadership. The probably the first and foremost one that has emerged in the last 5 to 10 years is just this idea of mental and emotional health. This was something that was not in the leadership books, I don't really think, of 20 years ago, but it's certainly kind of moved into the limelight. But I just have this theory that there's never been a good leader who was emotionally unhealthy. I think that emotional health and good leadership go hand in hand. And so for me, the last 5 or 10 years, I've been just trying to deconstruct. Okay, well, what does that look like? What are things we can do to get ourselves in that emotionally healthy and mentally healthy place? And so one of those things is gratitude. And again, this is another topic it's been talked about a good bit, but I have been using the term compulsive gratitude. I think sometimes some of these terms that we use are kind of soft and they don't really grab us. And so I'm a words guy. So I like the idea of compulsive gratitude, which is just this idea of constantly reframing everything happening around us through that lens. And what I found is it's completely transformative. And so, over the last 20, 30 years, there's been a glut of research around this. And it's fascinating. But the to kind of boil all that down from my perspective is that gratitude sort of rewires the neurological connections of the brain and it yields lots of positive outcomes. I mean, there's a couple studies that I've looked at. One of them, two researchers from Penn basically had participants write a letter of gratitude to someone, and then they sort of tested results before and after. And what they found was, I think it was like a 10% increase in general happiness and a 35% decrease in depressive symptoms just from the act of writing one thank you letter per week to someone in their life, which is just fascinating to me because that's not something that we think has would have that kind of positive outcome. Another study from Berkeley, a quote that came out of that study that it's unbelievable. Here's the quote. I've got it here. Gratitude unshackles us from toxic emotions. The study suggests that gratitude is helpful not just for healthy, well adjusted individuals, but also for those who struggle with mental health concerns. And so yeah, I've just been on this journey of recounting systematically, intentionally everything in my life that is something that's worthy of being thankful for. And my number one strategy here, to get practical, is I call it the compare down. And so most of us, when we do the comparison game, which we hear all about, comparison is the thief of joy, and comparison is bad, but it really is only bad, Gabe, when you're comparing up, right? If I'm constantly comparing what I have to people who are above me, socioeconomically or career-wise, that can lead me into some really dark places, and it makes me sad, it makes me a little bit bitter, and maybe resentful. But Gabe, I have just reoriented my entire sort of comparison ecosystem to compare down, and I'm constantly thinking about those, the disadvantaged around me, the marginalized around me, those who have gone through incredibly challenging things in life, no matter what that may be. And when I go there in a healthy way, not in a means to demean those people or to look down on them, that's not what it's about. But what happened is gratitude wells up in me because I realize just how great I have it, really, when you think about it. And then also I compared down like to the past. I mean, Gabe, I'm kind of a history nerd. Like, I love the Roman era. There's a couple other sort of the Greeks I love, but man, when you look at history, it's wild. I mean, the things that our ancestors had to deal with, we're foraging for food, we're testing berries. Oh, nope, this berry poisoned me and died. Oh, here comes a barbarian invasion. They slaughtered my family. The next week, there's a plague that's going to wipe out 60% of central Italy. So it's like, man, when you think about where we are at this moment in time, right? When like our biggest concern is, getting our home automation system to sync up, like those are the things that we're dealing with. But if you could just sort of keep in your mind the context of the day in which we live, and how amazing everything is, and how this thing called the internet has leveled the playing field and opened up 1,000 different ways to make a living, 1,000 different ways to learn and grow and engage our minds. I'm like, man, I'm 39. I don't feel like I have enough time to left on this earth to maximize all of this opportunity. And so when you just get your head in that headspace, and you do it consistently, that little rewiring, the neurological thing happens, and man, life just gets so much more beautiful, and it begins to seep out into all of your relationships and how you do business and gratitude, abundance mindset. So yeah, compulsive gratitude is a practice of mine.
I have to say, I've never heard gratitude put that way. I mean, I've heard the idea of a gratitude journal, and a gratitude practice, but I've never heard about the gratitude down. That's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, like I said, it's one of those things, Gabe, that like over time it can become a mental habit. I mean, I've told this story before and it's ridiculous and it's silly and maybe it doesn't sound believable, but it got to the point a couple years back. My husband and I, Brett, we were walking to a hamburger place here in Atlanta, and I stepped in gum on the sidewalk, which is a typically like a cuss worthy moment. And I'm not kidding you, Gabe. Like the minute my foot hit that gum and I pulled it up and looked down, this thought bubbled up. Wow, isn't it amazing you have shoes? And I'm like, where did that come from? But it was just this instinctual thing. And I really think it grows out of this gratitude mindset of like, Yeah, we can complain about the fact that we stepped in gum, but hey, guess what? You have shoes on. And how many people in this world don't have that privilege? So that's what I'm talking about. It's just it's weird. It's weird when you get your headspace there, and instead of the compulsive complaining that most of us have sort of simmered in, it's wild the change that happens.
It's almost a little stoic philosophy.
Yeah, it's got some stoic notes in there.
Yeah, there's a little stoic notes. There's a book I read on a daily basis called The Daily Stoic that is constantly bringing stuff like that up through notes from Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus and all of the great philosophers of those days. So it's really interesting that you had happy that you just have shoes.
Gosh, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, very interesting. How about self mapping? So we got gratitude, and I love your perspective on gratitude. The gratitude down. That's a whole nother way to look at this. How about some self mapping? Your thoughts there?
Yeah, so this is something I sort of stumbled into years ago. This idea of self mapping, but it was sort of inspired by, again, I'm a history nerd. I love old maps. And what's fantastic now with the internet is so many of them have been digitized. You could look at some map that some cartographer drew by hand of the Italian peninsula in 1643 or whatever. But what's interesting and kind of funny to me about these old maps is you'll often see out in the ocean, they'll have the coastline, let's say it's Italy, and out in the ocean, you'll see this phrase written in Latin, terra incognita. And it basically just means we don't know what's out there. Like this is the part of the map where we don't really know what's going on. And what's kind of funny and cute about it is the cartographers would draw little dragons and sea monsters and unicorns because they were just kind of like, ah, hey guys on these ships, you might want to avoid this area because we don't know what's going on out there. And so when I discovered this, I thought this is like our inner lives, right? Like our external lives, we've gotten really good at gauging and measuring, right? Our physical fitness, our physical appearance. We've got a million ways to manage that and to keep tracks on those things, to stay healthy. But our inner life is not that way. There's not an easy way to measure and gauge the health or the growth of our inner selves, our minds, our souls, our hearts. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh, that's terra incognita. Most people go through their entire lives with this terra incognita happening. They don't really know themselves. And I just have this belief that I am my greatest asset, right? The brain in my skull, the character that I am my greatest asset. I am my greatest chance at success. And I am also the reason if I have great failure. It's on me. And so it's incumbent on me to understand the parts of me that aren't visible, right? And so I kind of I view myself, my body, and my inner life as a machine. So literally, it's like I used to live in this cotton mill, and an old cotton mill turned into lofts in Cabbagetown, which is a little city in Atlanta. And they had these giant, old, rusty cotton machines. I don't even know how they worked, but at the cotton mill that I lived at, they had these big machines, and like I kind of view my life that way. Like we've got these little gears, and we've got this little lever and this switch, and so I am just fascinated with this idea of dadgummit, I've got to figure out how this machine works. I've only got 60, 70, 80, 90 years to figure this out. It's a race. It's a race to figure out how I have been designed and wired and my insecurities and my fears and my failures. And so I just began this thing about 10 years ago of just, I call it relentless noticing. So I just try to notice everything about myself, how I respond, how I react in certain situations, noticing what gets me excited, noticing what puts me to sleep, noticing my weaknesses. Gabe, I keep a running list of the things that I suck at. Right? I'm 39. Like I know what I'm bad at. I mean, I can tell you right now. I could pull that list up and say, BT Harman is not good at these things. Conversely, I know the things that I'm great at. I know that when I walk into the room, there are certain things, no matter what room I'm in, I'm the best in that room at that thing. And that's a good feeling, right? That gives me confidence. And so it is this really nice, beautiful balance of I am so well acquainted with my weaknesses. I no longer have to pretend like I'm great at these things, right? All this posturing and no, I can actually admit that I'm not good at them, and I can be inquisitive. I can be curious. I can ask for help. There's no pride there because I'm okay with that. I'm okay with my weaknesses. I'm okay with my strengths. And so for me, practically, and I'm being very esoteric. Practically, this looks like I just record these things in the Notes app on my phone. So for 10 years, I've got a note called the Machine of BT Harman, and I record these things. So let me just I pulled a couple excerpts for your audience here just to give you an example. One of those notes that I made, again, there are hundreds of them. I hate haggling. I hate haggling. I don't like negotiating. My whole life, I've been told, you need to negotiate. You've got to get the best price, and every time I do it, it just feels gross to me. It's not natural. We did negotiating classes when I was in my corporate job. You go to like one of these markets in a foreign country, and everyone's like, "You're trying to get this lady. She wants $6 for the necklace." I know we're gonna, I'm an American. We're gonna get her down to $3, and I'm like, "Why? What's the point?" And so I just over time I observed that I always hate that feeling. And so I've just accepted it. I'm not going to haggle. I'm probably not going to negotiate that much. That's just not who I am. And I'm no longer going to have this battle of feeling like, well, I got to save a buck here because everyone else does it. Therefore I do too. So that's a simple one. Another one that another observation I made about myself, I have a long pattern of conflict avoidance. This is my greatest weakness. I hate conflict. On the Enneagram, if you're familiar with that, it's a personality assessment. I'm an Enneagram 4. I don't like conflict, and this can be incredibly toxic, right? I mean, when I was managing people, if I'm fearful to have a tough conversation with an employee, in my marriage with my husband, if I'm scared to have a tough conversation with him, this can be very dangerous. And so, just the freedom in writing that down in this note that this is a potential hazard for me, and it's going to be something I have to work to overcome. Right? I'm not just accepting the fact that I'm terrible at conflict because I think that would have negative repercussions. But now that I know that it's a thing, it's a recurring pattern, I can fight it. I can deal with it. I can manage it. I can read books about it. I can go to therapy about it. Um, and so that's another one. The last one I'll share you. This one's very practical and kind of silly. I don't need to post controversial opinions on social media before noon. I learned this in the hard way. I have a pretty active Twitter presence. Sometimes I get pulled into all manner of discussions and debates about politics. And I would post some saucy, spicy opinion on Twitter, at 10 a.m. And then for the next 4 hours, I'm responding to replies and I'm getting into a debate. And my entire day is like shot, right? And so that's a very practical, simple example. But I'm like, if I'm going to post things that are going to draw a lot of attention, maybe I should post it at 4 p.m. in the day so it doesn't hijack my productivity from 10 a.m. on. So again, that's a silly example, but I just have gobs and gobs of notes like that, and I review them. And so I'm kind of like fine tuning my life. And what it's resulted in is I have just gained an incredible amount of self awareness. I really believe that I'm aware of my pitfalls. I'm aware of how my brain works. It gives me permission to not be great at everything and not feel bad about that. It helps me understand why I respond in certain ways. It helps me know my triggers. Right, all of us have things that just set us off. Maybe that's a male thing. I don't know. But understanding what those triggers are so I can see them coming. And instead of reacting, I can respond in a very measured way. And so this is what I call self mapping. And it's the most simple act ever. It's literally just starting to write these things down, thinking about them, talking about them maybe with your loved ones, and making changes and adjustments accordingly.
So, where did you get the idea for this 10 years ago? Because I don't know that I've ever heard much about recording the strengths, recording the weaknesses, and then reviewing them. I mean, we're talking 10 years ago that you decided to focus on the machine, we'll call it. Where did that come from? Or was it just a flat out epiphany?
Gabe, I don't know. I mean, listen, I'm not the first person to talk about it. It's a version of self awareness, and I'm not the first person to talk about that. I differentiate though. Self mapping is the action by which we achieve self awareness, right? I don't think it's helpful to tell people we need to be more self aware,
Mhm.
right? Like, okay, well, how do we do that? And I think all of us have thoughts about ourselves, but what I found is when we just take the act of writing those down and begin connecting dots, I mean, it was funny. Like one time, my CEO at our old company in one of those executive team meetings, he he actually pointed something out. He said, "BT, did you notice how every time we start talking about the financial matters of the organization, you completely zone out?" And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know that I did that." He's like, "Yeah, you just completely check out. I kind of need you to be more engaged with that." And so I started thinking about that. Like, I'm not really a math guy. I don't have a background in finance or economics. And so that's just on the career spectrum of things that I can have knowledge about. That's not one of them. It's something that kind of can put me to sleep at times. And so again, it's just good to know that. It's good to know that. And actually that was helpful that he pointed it out because I think obviously what's even better than us mapping ourselves is when those around us help us map ourselves by giving us thoughtful and tactful feedback in those kinds of moments. But it's just connecting these dots. And my theory is by the time you get to your mid late 30s, maybe it's your early 40s, if you've been doing this for a while, you just get so tuned in to the person that you are. And I think once you have a grasp of that, of your strengths, your weaknesses, your loves, your hates, what puts you to sleep, what gets you excited, once you know that and have that mapped out, boy, you begin to deploy it into the world. And you begin to deploy it into all these different opportunities and things that are out there. And it gets really, really fun. It's been a blast.
That's really cool. I'm gonna pull out a piece of paper and just start on that. I think that is really an interesting exercise.
Do it.
So that then brings me to that next piece, and that's that spinning of multiple plates, multiple streams of incomes. And you even said some of them were a trickle. That might be a great chance to move into that. Help me understand, what could we learn from spinning multiple plates, and then how the heck do you do it? Because I'm sure there's a few people who want to know how to spin more plates better. Because you always hear, and let me interject this piece. You always hear just focus on one thing at a time because you
Yep.
can't really multitask. It's bygone, foregone. It's not really possible to really do it well. So help me understand how you're doing that.
Yeah, so I agree, Gabe. Generally speaking, I think that being a specialist is the way to go, right? I mean, we're only on this earth for so long. We only have so much time to gain expertise in a certain way. So if someone out there knows they have a knack for accounting and they go all in at the age of 18 in college and 22 they graduate and career and they're all in on accounting and that's like their specialty skill that they want to deploy to earn income. Listen, I think that's probably the best way to do it and that's probably the best practice, I'll say. But I do think there are some of us out there who for me, it's all about curiosity. I am so intensely curious about so many things, and I'm energized by the randomness and the variety of it all. So, but I actually think I make the case. I don't advise those in their 20s that often on career and life, but when I do, one of the bits of advice I give, particularly for those who are young in their career, is to generalize. Try everything, right? Because I think about this idea all the time, like LeBron James, right? One of the greatest basketball players of our generation. What if LeBron was born in a place where there wasn't basketball? Like his potential would have never been realized. Now he probably would have been successful at something else, but like he just kind of got lucky that his physical prowess, his knack for the game, he was born into a place where basketball was present. And so I think about all that time. I think about that all the time with our careers. Like, what if your nature and in your skill set, you would be an incredible computer programmer, but you never tried it, you never tried it. And so you're over here doing accounting when it's like, no, your deepest calling and your deepest skill set would have been better deployed in technology. And so I think about that a lot. So I think when you're in your 20s, and this is what I loved about being with a startup in my early 20s, is that as you probably know, Gabe, like if you're in a startup, you wear all the hats. You're like doing some marketing and now you're doing some accounting and now you're doing some HR stuff. And so I got exposed to all of these different disciplines of business. And every single one was a data point, right? Love this, hate this, puts me to sleep, gets me excited. Wow, this is amazing. Wow, this sucks. And if you keep doing that enough, you wake up one day and you're like, wow, again, back to self awareness. I am deeply acquainted with what I love and what gets me excited. And so, and sometimes those things come in conflict. I mean, one of my latest things that I'm monetizing now is graphic design. I have always dabbled in graphic design, but I have never called myself a graphic designer, right? The whole like verb versus the noun thing. But I'm now at a point where like I'm a pretty good graphic designer. I'm charging pretty good rates to design things for people. I think I'm a graphic designer now, and that's because I have just made it this sort of relentless pursuit of tinkering. I tinker in graphic design. I keep tinker in copywriting. I tinker in brand strategy. And what I love now, Gabe, the ultimate game changer here is the internet. The fact that any of us can educate ourselves. I mean, we have more access to education, information, and knowledge than in the history of mankind. And the value of a college degree I think goes down by the day because you've got kids out there binging YouTube videos on graphic design or programming or Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, whatever it is, and they are self-educating at such a rapid pace that they are even in their 20s have more expertise in some of this stuff than people who've been doing it their whole lives. So yeah, I think to me that the access we have to unlimited learning via podcast, YouTube, etc., has completely changed our ability to engage with some of these other interests that we have beyond what we went to college for.
And so then on a practical matter, how are you handling the multiple things going on? I mean, do you go back to what I was saying was the time blocking, or the do you have a certain things you do on certain days, or is your routine been changed? Because I'm sure there's somebody out here spinning multiple plates, going, "Holy crap, I'm about ready to drop some of these. How do I keep these going?" So I guess my question for you is, how do you keep these plates going practically?
I don't have a ton of wisdom there, Gabe, because I don't do time blocking. My best bit of advice I have there is to manage the number of plates, right? Like I have gotten very specific about the projects I say yes and no to. And again, this goes back to the self-awareness piece of like I now know with the skills that I have, graphic design, copy, whatever those all those different things, I've gotten really dialed in on how long those things take, which has helped me adjust my pricing, how I charge for things. And so for me, that's the key piece. If I get that piece right, Gabe, everything else kind of works. So, I mean, I learned early in my consulting career, I really can't handle more than two or three big projects at once. So like you can give me like let me I rebrand a nonprofit and then I'm working on a personal podcast. That's two projects. That's pretty much it. When I get into three, four, and more, the whole system collapses because now my creative energy and attention is divided so many ways, and every project gets sort of short shrift. And so, I think that would be it. Would that be my number one tip? Is to number one, get your economics in line where what you're charging for your work because you're valuing your work and you truly are an expert at what you do. Get that piece as high as you can, and then be selective with the clients that you take on. I mean, I'm a big believer in firing clients. If a client is remotely high maintenance, rude, deceptive, you will not believe how quickly I will abandon that client, right? Because I tell my clients from day one, I'm like, listen, I am going to give you 100%. I'm going to make you successful. Whatever you're hiring me to do, it's going to work. It's going to be beautiful. We're going to have tangible results to show from it. And in exchange, I expect you to treat me with respect, to honor your word, to respond to emails in a remotely timely fashion. And so over time, over the last 5 or 6 years, I've cultivated a client list that's just awesome. And they kind of know how we do things together. And so I think that's it. It's just a matter of you can balance a few plates, but you just can't have too many. I mean, it's that principle of like you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And I think that's what I've tried to understand.
Interesting. I appreciate it. Well, we're at a point now in the podcast where we got to talk a little bit about money. This is a podcast about money, and there's three questions I ask every one of my guests. And the first question is, "What's the smartest thing you've ever done regarding money?" And share that story if you would.
So two answers here, if I can get to the honest answer is buying a loft in a specific part of town of Atlanta in 2016. I bought my for actually my second place, but bought a place in 2016, and by absolute happenstance and luck and positive economics, I sold it last year and made a big chunk of cash. So and that was even one of those moments for me because I'd never made money off selling a piece of property before, and I was like, oh, this is how wealth is often created, and it actually has a lot to do with luck. People get lucky and buy things at the right time, and so because that is not something that's reproducible necessarily, though it is the honest answer. My second answer would be honestly embedding myself in a dynamic organization at a young age, because what that did was it developed me. I built so many skills, and that I connect that to earning potential because I do think sort of the state of your average worker in America is just not great. I just still think people aren't. I don't know if they aren't applying themselves. Their work ethic is low, but I just think the bar by employers is often so low that if someone comes in who is hungry and motivated and positive and has a voracious work ethic, they can just be promoted very quickly. I really do believe that because I mean, I remember even hiring an organization, just finding those kind of people just felt very difficult. And so yeah, I think being in that organization, learning the basic skills of business, learning about character and hard work and creativity and strategy, that set me up for a lifetime, I think, of positive financial earning. And again, that may be a vague answer, but that really is true for me.
Yeah, that's good. Everybody's answers are their answers, and that's the best part about it. So help me understand the biggest money mistake you've ever made, and tell me that story.
I would say the biggest money mistake is overvaluing it. I have this new theory, or at least for me, it's true. In my 20s, my career focus was about making more money, right? And that was the absolute center of the bullseye. And then I started making good money and was using money to sort of medicate my own problems and my loneliness in life, which is a whole nother story. I mean, I was on a first name basis with the lady at Nordstrom for a while, like she would come in, BT, good to see you, because she saw dollar signs, and I drove a really nice car for a season. And so those things were fun. And I did not come from a lot of money. And so that was great. And it was fun for a while. But then over time, you realize that you can only keep upgrading things so much, and there's not an equal return on the spend. And so I just made a shift in my mind in my 30s to say, I think time is the game. Right? Like I thought that money was the game, but time is actually the game, because time is something, we can never have, it's always ticking. We never have enough of it. It's always going away. We're always moving and inching closer to death. And so for me, I made the choice. I took a six-figure pay cut when I walked away from that job, and that was intentional. I knew that would happen. I knew it was going to be really hard for a season, but I did that to gain control of my time, because once I had control of my time, I could begin to get myself in a healthier place mentally, emotionally, physically, and life has just been a lot more beautiful since then. So yeah, I think money's important. I think it opens up a lot of doors, but I do think it's a really really fool's errand to think that increasing amounts of money leads to increasing happiness, because I don't think that's true.
Yeah, very interesting. I appreciate that. So the last question I ask everybody is, what does mastering your finances mean to you?
I'd say to me, mastering finances. Uh, I mean, practically, created a budget 5 years ago. That was a first time thing. Having just knowing where my money is going, that is a big part of it. But I think mastering finance is the outcome, other than the practical nature of it. The outcome should be creating peace of mind. I mean, I think the Dave Ramsey principle. Something I was a big Dave Ramsey fan years ago, and he teaches this principle of having an emergency fund, which is the most boring thing you can do with money, right? Stick it in a savings account that doesn't even really bear interest and is still liquid. But gosh, Gabe, the amount of just, particularly when I was young in my career, the amount of peace of mind that gave me to know that if something went wrong, I had a little stash of cash to deploy to get myself out of it. And the older I've gotten, that emergency fund has grown. Um, and yeah, so just to be able to know that you can weather a rainy day or a rainy season or a pandemic in this case, that you've got some cash on hand. And so again, I'm not an investor. I'm not a big outgrowing my money aggressively kind of person. So for me at this season of life, having that peace of mind, to me, that's mastering finances, is using money to create a peace of mind, that hopefully eventually will uh, transform into additional wealth that I could then use to help and bless others with.
I love it. That's absolutely perfect. It's amazing how many people I help and clients that come to me. And the first thing that we do is we talk about that boring emergency fund.
So boring, right?
It is, but it's one of those. You said it perfectly. It's peace of mind, and that's what mastering your finances does. It provides peace of mind. So this has been absolutely amazing today, and I'm sure somebody's going to raise their hand and say, "Hey, BT, I'd like to chat with you again." So and learn more about how you might be able to help them. So my question is how can people reach you? What's going to be the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so all of my random pursuits are sort of consolidated at btharman.com. That's Harman with two A's. So my consulting work, I've got links to my podcasts on there. And then social media wise, of course, I'm on LinkedIn, BT Harman, but I would say Instagram is my most active platform. That's BT_Harman on Instagram. Come say hello. Let me know you heard me. Let me know if you learned anything from this. I would love to connect and get to know you better.
That's fantastic. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
No, that's it. This has been so fun. Thank you so much for having me, Gabe. I love what you're doing, and love listening to this podcast. As a fellow podcaster, Gabe, I got to tell your listeners, some of them are not subscribed. And I would say if you're listening right now, you need to go and hit that little subscribe or follow button or whatever app you use, because that way, every time Gabe puts out a new episode, you're going to see it in your latest episodes list. So if you haven't done that, I bet you should probably do it today.
I would agree. Please do that. That would be great. And thanks for thanks for that little promo there. I appreciate it, BT.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks for being on today. I really appreciate it.
Cheers. Thanks, Gabe.
Well, solopreneurs, that was a fantastic conversation with BT Harman of btharman.com. All of his information is going to be in the show notes on how to get a hold of him. My three takeaways from this conversation are: one, a gratitude practice, a practice of gratitude. But what he said was a comparison more down than up, but do it in a healthy way. And so, when thinking about how grateful you are for things, don't compare yourself to those who have more than you that might make you feel bad. Think of yourself as more fortunate in how you're handling your gratitude practice. Number two, self mapping. Get a good understanding of what you're good at, what you're not good at, your positives, your negatives, your strengths, your weaknesses. And the most important piece of that is to record those. Even if it's just a notes app on your phone, record them. The act of recording those starts to make them real by connecting them in your brain, and then review them on a regular basis so that you can start to keep yourself on the line of the positives. My coaching program that I'm involved in, we talk about working on activities that are above the line of energy and below the line of energy, and focusing on where your strengths are and your positives and what you're good at has a tendency to keep you on the above the line activities, which is where you operate in your genius and where you're doing great. The third takeaway that I have of spinning multiple plates is to make sure that you're to manage the volume of those plates and those business activities and those interests that you have, and make sure that you're charging appropriately for your time so that you are being compensated right for doing what it is that you're doing and providing the value that you do to your clients and the people out there. Like BT said at the end of the interview, please go and either subscribe or follow this podcast so that you can keep getting these podcasts showing up into your feed each and every week. Thanks again for listening, and have a fantastic day.